My name is Amit. I'm one of the co-founders here at Mantle. With Mantle.com, we are a venture-backed startup based out of Toronto in Canada, with presence all over North America. At Mantle, we're revamping the way private assets are managed, and broadly speaking, we're tackling the cap table space. So all the way from cap tables to capital calls. And on the investment side, we're with family offices, fund of funds, and larger institutional investors who need to get organized with their investments.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So, I did research ahead of our interview, so I know what these terms mean. But for anyone who maybe isn't as familiar, do you want to explain what cap tables and capital calls are?
Yeah, absolutely. So a cap table or a capitalization table is effectively a ledger of company ownership. Now, for 99% of privately owned businesses out there, the owners are typically just one or two individuals. It could be a family business, it could be an individual, or maybe a few people owning it. And there's a very clear understanding of what percentage is owned by which person. In a venture backed startup context, the ownership tracking gets way more complicated simply because of the financial instruments used to fund these startups. As an example, if you are a very early stage pre seed company, chances are you've raised some money either via angels or friends and family, and they will use an instrument called a SAFE, a simple agreement for future equity. And the way a SAFE works, without getting too technical, is that it's effectively a promise of future ownership in the company, but you get the money today, right? So the idea there is that we will, like, if I'm the investor, I'm going to write a check in a company right now. And my expectation of that money translating to stock happens in the future when there's more clarity on the company's valuation based on like a future financing round. And you can imagine once you have a whole bunch of safes, and then you hire some employees, you hire some board members, you hire some advisors, and you give them option grants, uh, things can really start to get complicated, which is where a cap table comes into play. And Mantle right now is a modern, fresh take on tracking your cap table.
Mhm. Awesome. That was a great explanation. So how did you find yourself in this industry focused on this service?
Our founding team, we've been in the startup game for well over 15 years now. And we've sort of helped startups, worked with startups, built startups, and we also have a lot of enterprise experience. Effectively, over those 15 years, if there was one common thread we noticed across the various companies and the exits, it was the fact that cap tables were often a mess. And if you are an investor, if you're in this venture ecosystem, you're probably nodding along saying, oh, yeah, like, I've seen this happen. Maybe you're a lawyer, maybe you're a founder who's like done it before. And the primary reason that happens is it's one of those esoteric things that founders don't pay attention to unless it becomes a problem. So they'll pay really close attention to it, maybe a few times a year when there are big important things happening in the company. And then past that, it just sort of gets neglected. And without that constant tracking and grooming, it can just get really messy. And for a lot of startups, it ends up in a spreadsheet. The problem with the spreadsheet, and I can get into that in more detail, but spreadsheets have their own pitfalls. So the long and short of it is, we felt like this was a personal pain point that needed to get solved, and that's why we founded Mantle just over 3.5 years ago now.
Yeah, awesome. So many follow-up questions. So your URL with Mantle, can you talk about the choice to throw the with in front of it?
A lot of it comes down to what's available, right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, dictionary domain names are hard to get. Um, when we started, we actually we had a similar thesis, but there was a component of our thesis in the early days, which was cap tables on the blockchain. The idea being that you would have an immutable ledger of company ownership, and there would be no conflict and arguments and et cetera, no ambiguity, right? So we were looking at the trendy top level domains at the time, like XYZ and whatever. But fast forward to today, we realized, like, as we spent the time into constructing our brand, getting our logo and press kit in place, it was that we needed to stay on the .com space. And with Mantle just sounded right. Our application actually, the two different platforms, they are on a subdomain, and it all kind of makes sense when you lay it all out. So it's like equity.withmantle.com is how you get to our platform, as an example, or portal.withmantle.com is how you get into the investment side of things.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean, for me, listening to you explain that, it's like fix it with Mantle, like solve it with Mantle. You sort of just unconsciously fill in what comes, what problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, yeah, you nailed it. And if that's what our clients and prospects are thinking, then we've done something right.
Yeah, yeah, that's really smart. Um, and it's memorable as well. Why Mantle?
So this actually comes down to us doing. It's all part of our brand exploration, right? And without getting into all of the history, we fundamentally landed on the theme that you have to build your business on a solid core. Now, of course, the Earth's mantle is not solid, but let's not get into the, if you really want to be pedantic about it, maybe it doesn't fit as well. But it sounded right. It sounded fresh. It sounded something new, but also something trustworthy. It just kind of made sense. And it all kind of came together with like the logo and the branding and her initial take on the website, which is actually quite similar to the website we have today. Obviously, didn't have quite as many pages. It was literally just a landing page, but thematically it lined up.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, the Mantle itself, like for me, I think of like treasured heirlooms you put on the mantle, or like a family self-portrait, or a family portrait or something. So that's, just elicits feelings of great importance.
Exactly right, and
Yeah.
you wanted to have a sense of seriousness, but not it can't be too stuffy. So we're trying to strike a balance.
Yeah. Awesome. And then, so, I read your website, did some independent research, all that stuff. How, like, it sounds like AI is a component, reads all the documents, contracts, breakdowns, everything. How does it work exactly, from your perspective?
There's a lot to unpack there, but before I kind of give you the specifics on it, I think having some context here is helpful, which is our team. We're a group of builders and technologists. So we love to take modern tech, build with it, but more importantly, not just build for the sake of flashiness. It's build to solve a specific problem or solve problems, right? So that's how we approach all technology. With AI specifically, in our case, for our platforms, 100% of the focus is on extraction capabilities, right? So there's no generative piece here. Like, we're not generating legal contracts. We leave that to the law firms themselves. But the idea is that, for example, if you are a company and you are currently set up on a spreadsheet that you've been managing for years, or you are set up on a legacy incumbent that you've been with for years, we can have you migrated over from that solution to Mantle in days. And part of that magic is we literally feed all of your securities. So all of the executed documents, all the way from incorporation to board consents, option plans, option grants, share grants, etc., get them AI extracted, and then we have a human in the loop process to verify and sort of provide a stamp of approval, if you will. Once we're there, we hit the publish button and you have your cap table migrated very, very quickly. It's 100% white glove for paying clients. We also have extraction capabilities on the investment side of the platform, and that gets into more investment specific documents. So I mentioned capital calls earlier, their distribution statements, LPAs, like limited partner agreements. There can be capital statements, bunch of tax documents. For example, K1 is really common and popular for American funds, 1042S for Canadian funds, so on and so forth, right? So there's just a bunch of different documents where we've constructed a bespoke engine that understands these docs so that we're not just leaving it up to LLMs to run free, right? It's well within the guidelines of the way we've constructed the engine. And to reassure any listener, we do not use any customer data for model training. We have enterprise deals with the various LLM providers. Our primary is Google's Gemini. We're Google Cloud Build partners. So there's absolutely no training happening on customer data.
Plus, that's an important caveat these days. So, what does it cost, and how did you decide on what your service model or charging model would look like?
It when I think about it in retrospect, I feel like we've done something right. And I only say this not in a self-congratulatory way, but more in a sort of analytical way of, if we look at the competition, look at all their reviews, sort by 1-star reviews, and you start to address those, I think you start to get something that resembles our approach. As an example, a very common problem and a lot of the fatigue that comes out of subscription plans, especially with SaaS products, especially with B2B for companies and startups and more, is the fact that the costs go up as your company scales. But the reality is, are you really getting much more value per seat? Of course, it's a little bit different. If it's an email account or a chat account, sure, go ahead. But if it's a ledger of your company ownership, and yes, there are more people on it, but and it's more complex, but it's not fundamentally changing in terms of like the effort required to maintain such a cap table. Fundamentally, our view was we will approach the market with a pricing model we have not seen anywhere else, which is a flat rate pricing model. So you go to our website, you look at the pricing page, the dollar value you see there is exactly the dollar value you pay. No gotchas, no surprises. It goes from 0 to $3,000 a year, depending on what growth stage you are as a company. So yes, we do have a free plan, obviously, to capture the early stage companies that are typically incubated or part of an accelerator. But once things start to get real, you take investor dollars in or you start hiring people, you're going to need some legal documents. And that's when you kind of move up to the paid plan. So that's how we're approaching it on the cap table side of things.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. I loved your remark on examining competitors' 1-star reviews for dialing in your service. That's brilliant. Where'd you come up with that?
I'm sure I heard it somewhere in some podcast or something. I forget the specific source. So I'm not the originator of that insight, but I'm definitely a believer.
Yeah. No, that's the most brilliant advice I've heard all week. I think everyone could benefit from that. Just searching out your competitors and checking out their 1-star reviews. And I can't imagine more impactful ideas to be found than there.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, the context was talking about consumer startups or consumer companies, if you will, right? Like B2C. So, oh, you
Yep.
want to come up with some new gadget or something, like look at the one-star reviews of, and kind of and build around that effectively. But I think you can look at it at an abstract level and it applies to services and B2B and more. And of course, that can't be your only North Star in the way you build things. You still want to construct an experience which is top class, works well, it's intuitive. And that's where a lot of our own design thinking goes into building what we've built.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Awesome. So it sounds like, putting all of this super important, sensitive information somewhere that does a much better job of organizing it and presenting the data. There may be some surprising benefits or insights. Can you talk about any outcomes like that?
It comes down to trends we see. So as an example, a common gap we'll notice in a lot of startup cap tables is that they fall behind on board resolutions or board consents. And effectively, for any sort of privately owned corporation, you should have a board of directors. It could be one person, but legally there needs to be a board. And that board will authorize a bunch of different amendments to the corporation's structure, be it the introduction of an equity plan, be it the issuance of shares, and more. Of course, most law firms will shepherd you through this and take care of it for you. But the gap we see, especially with early stage companies, is they're hesitant to engage with their law firm. It costs money, so they're effectively winging it. And I think that can come back to haunt you, right? That's one of the common things we see. Another common trend we'll see is founders give away large percentages of their company without even realizing it. So earlier on, I mentioned safes like simple agreement for future equity and how they convert to a percentage at the next financing round, like a price round. The problem with that is if you don't run some hypotheticals of like what's known as a pro forma or an as is cap table, you may be in for sticker shock, right? You may not even realize as a founder you've given away 30, 40, maybe even 50% of your company because you just kept taking in the money and maybe investors were interested and you don't want to say no to them or you couldn't, figure out the right combination of how much money you want to raise and what the valuation cap should be, et cetera. So there's a bunch of like mechanics there that typically first time founders don't look into until it's too late. So those are the two sort of pitfalls we see. And part of our goal with our platform beyond just providing the platform and the service itself is the education and the awareness around why this is so important.
Mhm. Awesome. Awesome. So who is your ideal client and when should they start working with you? Yeah.
Our ideal client is effectively a venture-backed startup or a company that's thinking about getting venture-backed, all the way from inception to Series B and even Series C in some cases, depending on how complex their needs are, which I realize is a very wide spectrum, but effectively, those are all the companies that have a lot of activity as it comes to managing their option plan, managing their stock grants, managing their board consents, and more. And they would benefit the most from capital management platform. And I'll just add one quick thing there, which is for the very young companies, a lot of times founders will say, well, I it's just two of us. Like, why do I need a software to track it? And I go back to the education and awareness piece, which is if you don't pay attention to it now, you're going to be in for a surprise. It's going to create a fire drill. You're going to have this emergency thing one day before you're trying to close an investor's check, and you're trying to say, "Oh, I need a tied out cap table. What is that? Let me Google it. Let me figure it out. And now you're scrambling. It's not a good place to be. So when you have platforms like Mantle that literally give it away for free, $0, no strings attached, might as well get organized. Use that Sunday evening, use that find some time in your day to spend the hour to be ready, so that it's one less thing to stress about in an important milestone for your company.
Mhm. Awesome. Awesome. And you mentioned, educating folks to kind of get the word out. Is that the primary way you guys, raise awareness of Mantle, or how do you find clients?
Yeah, that's one of the primary channels for us. So we've gone down the path of content marketing, and we're taking the long-term approach here. So if anyone visits our blog, you will notice not only are there a lot of articles there, and no, they're not AI authored. They're written by a human. They're checked, proofread, for accuracy and more. And there are a lot of what I would call just forever pieces, right? So, how do saves convert? When should I raise? When should I set up a cap table? How should I think about my first hire? And more. There's just so much there. It's completely free. Just Google it or Chat GPT it or whatever, and you'll get to it. Um, and that ends up being a very good channel for us. Plus events, podcasts, and social media. But what are we posting on social media? A lot of it, again, goes back to educational content, right? So there may be interview pieces, there's Q&A pieces or more, but it's anchored around, let us share some knowledge that may be helpful to you.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great approach. You have the answers. People come to you and they're like, "Oh, okay, wow, you answered my question," and you can make this process so much easier. It's a great move. We are coming towards the end of our time together. I have one final question for you. It is an open-ended question. You can take it in any direction that you like, big, small, short, long. It's the name of the show. My question is, what are you working towards?
That's a pretty loaded question. I think being a co-founder at a startup means that you're always building towards something big as it relates to your um, per, as it aligns your personal goals with your professional goals, right? So in our case, we are a seed stage startup. We've been around for 3.5 years. A big part of what we're working towards now is the next phase for the company. Specifically, what does that look like is something we have to discover and work towards. We obviously have some specific things we're working on. I can't reveal it just yet, but we're pretty excited to share some news at some point. But effectively, it is taking care of the team, building the product, taking care of our customers, and there's no ranking order when it comes to those things. It's just everything's important, and that's what I'm building towards.
Mhm. Awesome. Awesome. Where can my audience find out more about you and with Mantle.com?
The easiest way is start with our website, withmantle.com. If you go /start or /free, you'll be funneled into specific pages that may be more relevant to you, but you can just start at the homepage. We're on pretty much all of the social networks, I think. So LinkedIn, X, Blue Sky, TikTok, YouTube, and Reddit. We're actively building out our subreddit community. So if you have questions, anything that's startup related, feel free to pop in reddit.com/r/withmantle. And there are always one or two members of our team active on there. So happy to engage in conversation on a free network. So yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Amit. This was great, man.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Chris. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to more.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. To all our listeners out there, thanks so much for tuning in and keep on growing out there, everybody. See ya.